All right, it looks like we are all here. Hello and welcome, everyone. So I believe we are recording, so I'll just go ahead and kick us off. Hello and welcome, everyone, to another Chat and Learn here with Power to Fly. My name is Mariella Marie, and as always, super excited to roll into this next hour with you all. We are jumping into part 3 of this 3-part series. Thanks to those who have joined us already for part 1 and part 2. And if you are new with us, hello, and welcome. Just before we get started, I just want to go over some quick housekeeping guidelines to set us up for success so we can make sure that everyone's feeling heard and so that we can maximize this experience for everyone involved today. So feel free to turn on your cameras if you feel called to do so. I see a couple of you have already done that. Hello, thank you for joining us. We'd love to share this virtual space with you with your cameras on if you feel called to do so. I know some people need that extra invitation, so join us if you can. If not, please use the chat box whenever you'd like throughout this hour to drop any questions, any reflections, any of your own resources that you might find useful as well. I also like to invite folks who are joining to network among yourselves in the chat box. So you can do that by dropping your preferred way of connecting, whether that be LinkedIn or your email, your website, or any other social medias that you'd like to share today in the chat. So feel free to use this time for those who are joining live to network in the chat box. And as we roll through today's conversation, we will be going through some questions that folks have previously submitted, but if you have any questions at any point, again, use the chat box. Things might come up at the last minute, so drop your questions in the chat. And if anyone has any sensitive information and you prefer to be kept anonymous, just find me in the chat box under Mariella Marie. You can write to me privately there and I will raise your question or your reflection and keep you anonymous, especially because I know some of you might be going through some conflict at the moment and you might not want to, call out whoever you're going through, the situation with here live with us. So feel free to reach out to me privately and I'll keep you anonymous there. All right, so if this is your first time joining where I am moderating, I just want to say hello and welcome again. So I am calling from the mighty mountains of Patagonia, Argentina, here, the original lands of the Mapuche people. And I love bringing our awareness back to emotional intelligence whenever I can. So I might bring some of my reflections. If anyone is interested in talking about or sharing resources about how we can develop our emotional intelligence at work, and at home and in our communities, feel free to drop those in the chat as well. Otherwise, you can find me working with my partner in community. I usually say partner in crime, but we're trying to do some things totally opposite of committing crimes here. We're trying to help liberate everyone and share, different stories so that we can come together and collaborate. So I just want to pass the mic here to my colleague, Sunjata. Let us know a little bit about yourself for those who have not heard you speak yet here on this 3-part series. Let us know why you do what you do, and then we will stop sharing the screen because I know you've got a nice demo set up for us before we roll through the questions. So thank you so much for joining us today. And again, for sharing your knowledge and empowering us to work together in this crazy, crazy world.
Thank you so much, Mariella, for teeing me up in such a wonderful and beautiful way, as usual. I'm so grateful for you. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're zooming in from. I'm so grateful that you all have chosen to join us to learn a little bit more about, co-creating a thriving team culture in your company. And as you see here on the screen, I'm Sunjata, and I'm zooming in from Douglasville, Georgia, which is in the Metro Atlanta area. And I won't talk much about my bio because you see it there, but I'll just say, I'm just truly passionate about, about people and our capacity to communicate peacefully and effectively to get things done collaboratively. And I've had this innate belief and feeling that it's possible. And I've been working for many years now, helping people to do just that. And I believe that conflict, though inevitable, is actually something that is can be generative. And it's something that can help us all grow if leveraged the right way. Eliminated conflict is not the goal. The goal is using conflict as opportunity. And that's what this conversation and the work that we do is all about. So looking forward to getting into it.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to be dropping some helpful links here in the chat in just a few moments. Until then, I'll stop sharing the screen, Sunjata, so you can get us kicked off with your demo here. But just to gauge our audience I didn't see anyone dropping in the chat just yet. I would love to know. So for those of you who are joining us live, drop a 1 in the chat if you're currently experiencing conflict in the workplace and need help resolving it like yesterday. So you're really in a hard place and you need, some really concise key points on how to resolve conflict today. Drop a 2 in the chat though if you are just curious and you're here more for preventative action. So just want to see where folks are at today in the chat. So I see we've got lots of preventative folks. Awesome, great. Lots of folks dropping 2s, 1 and 2. Thank you for being honest there. All right, so seems like we got a couple of 1s, mostly 2. So I just acknowledge everyone for coming together today to try to prevent, as Sunjata says, we can't get rid of conflict, but we can prevent conflict from escalating and just, not showing our authentic selves with ways, to continue to collaborate together. So I see more folks are dropping in the chat. So some more 1s. Awesome. So Sunjata, just so you know, that's who we've got here on the call today. So before I roll through the questions folks have submitted previous to this chat, just want to give you the platform so you can help set the stage for why folks are using this tool and the benefits that they have experienced as well.
Sure. And before I go into it, did you want to talk about the previous sessions now, or are you going to do that a little bit later?
You know what, actually, I can actually remind folks that by dropping in the chat. So everyone, I'm going to just drop in the chat some links that you can watch part 1 of our session and also part 2. And basically, yeah, in a nutshell, if you weren't able to join us for part 1 and part 2. So part 1 was called Conflict Resolution Career Coaching, Navigating Conflict Resolution Using Authentic Dialogue. So some of the key points that were addressed there, if you didn't join us for that one, was how we can foster in our teams the skills required to resolve conflict with authentic dialogue. The main difference is about debate and authentic dialogue. So some people, probably have heard of authentic dialogue, but they never used it in the workplace. So we went through some of those differences there. And then we talked about how we can make sure that a conversation doesn't turn into a debate. So we were able to get a lot of folks who were interested consult with us. And actually there was someone who received a free conflict consultation through us about a specific work issue that they were dealing with that led to further conversation about how their team can resolve conflict. So I'll drop a link to that chat in the chat box so you can have access to that and rewatch. Part 2 was all about conflict resolution, co-creating a thriving work culture. So we talked about, how co-creating a culture statement specifically and core values enhances the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging practices in the workplace. We also talked about how values-based systems, conflict resolution improves trust and collaboration. And we had some folks also get 3 complementary conflict consults with us. So they were able to meet with us and just dive deeper into the tools that we use with different companies. And so today we're also going to give you all an opportunity to sign up for either a free conflict consult. So for those who dropped a 1 in the chat, if you need support right now, we'll drop a link for you to tell us why you need that support. We'll reach out to you if you are one of the 3 people that we select. So, or if you dropped a 2 in the chat, this is just will be more like a discovery call for you to learn more about the work that we're doing specifically with team cultures. And I see that Paloma is already dropping in the chat, so thank you so much. So Sunjata, part 3, thank you all for hanging in there. I talked about part 1, part 2, now we're getting into part 3. So Sunjata, help us set the stage. You can start to do your demo whenever you feel ready.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for that recap, Mariella. Yeah, so basically this whole series of 3 chats has been, we've been sharing little elements from our co-creating a thriving team culture training. And Mariella laid it out to you in terms of what we've done in the previous 2 chats and what we've covered. And today's chat and demo is pretty much like a culmination of how we roll those particular workshops that we do with teams into the use of a tool called the Change Up tool. And I'm going to share a brief demo with you all and then get into answering some of your questions that you pre-submitted. So let me share my screen here. All right, you can see it, great. Okay, so now let me make an adjustment here. All right. So what you're looking at here is called a change-up board. And a change-up board is a agile change management tool that's rooted in the agile methodology as well as consent-based decision-making. And both of those things, consent-based decision-making is a framework from a concept called sociocracy. And, the agile, this whole change-up board, well, some of you may have heard of, agile methodology that's used in a lot of corporations, especially tech companies. It was actually, that methodology was adapted for an education model called the Agile Learning Center Network. And they created this board and this process for remaining aligned and accountable to whatever they want to anchor the board by. And when I say anchor, in this case, we're going to talk about anchoring this board with a culture statement and core values. This board could also be anchored with a mission. It could be anchored with DEI goals and objectives. It could also be used for just monitoring the process of getting work done in a conventional like Kanban board style and framework. So it can be adapted to many ways. We primarily use it for culture and values. So with that being said, we worked with a particular team at Nike in 2021, where we helped them go through the entire process of this training. And we helped them to develop their culture statement, which I'm going to use here for this demo, as well as their core values. This isn't the overarching company of Nike that has, 75,000 employees. This is a specific team that had about 200 team members on this particular, team in Nike. And as you see here, you see they have a culture statement, they have core values, and then you'll notice the headings on these cards: awareness, need, value, trying it out, practicing, getting good at it, and integrate it. So I'm going to cover how those all work. So the purpose of the change-up board is just acknowledging the fact that, we live in a world of constant change. And a lot of times when people get together to make decisions, there tends to be some pressure around getting things right in the moment. Well, this process, it acknowledges that change is inevitable. Everything is going to change. So you don't have to make a decision that is permanent. You only have to make a decision that is good enough for now and safe enough to try. Also, the whole purpose of this board is that you can make decisions or resolve conflicts in a collaborative way. And it gives a framework for doing so collaboratively, where everyone is included and everyone feels like they belong to the process. And it's just an equitable process in general, as you'll see. So with that being said, I'm going to talk through some of the mechanics. And then as I'm doing that, some other things will come up. And let's start with if you look at the culture statement, it says, we lead Nike's transformation through being a collaborative, shared learning team that is safe, fun, and supportive. We are an inclusive, high energy, trusted business partner with shared accountability, celebrating our wins and learning from failures as one. So that was a culture statement that we helped that team co-create together. The beautiful thing about that is, it may be hard to believe, but we consolidated 200 answers of what people wanted the culture and the values for their team to be into themes. And then we were able to come up with this culture statement and these 5 core values: integrity, connection, purpose, thrive, and winning. And the beautiful thing with that is that everyone a part of that team, because it was a co-creative process, they could see themselves in that culture statement and they could see themselves in those core values. So therefore, the level of buy-in was even greater than if it was just top down, if that makes sense. So now that this team is now anchored, through these shared values and these shared culture statement in terms of how they want to be for one another and how they want to work together, now they can have what we call change-up meetings or culture check-ins. Different teams call it different things. Okay, you can call it whatever you want. But let's say I'm going to use the term culture check-in. So in the subsequent month, after all this is done, there's a culture check-in meeting that is facilitated by Grow Dialogue. So we facilitate this process because a facilitator is necessary for the process, okay? So we facilitate this process for our clients for as long as they need us to. Some clients want us to facilitate it continually. Others have someone on the team that eventually steps up and says, someone or somebody's who step up and say, we got the process, we got the hang of it, we can facilitate. But the role of the facilitator is to help move, the team members through this process. So when you come to a culture check-in meeting, the facilitator will source awarenesses by asking the individuals who are participants, are there any awarenesses around the ways that we may be currently misaligned with our culture statement and our core values, whether that be within our interpersonal or intrapersonal interactions, or whether it be in our day-to-day operations. Are there any ways that we're misaligned? So then, individuals can share their awarenesses, write them into the board, and then the facilitator will help that proposer. Let's say we start with the first person. I'm going to use, if you look at here where it says awareness, I have an example here, and it says shared learning is missing from the team. Now, this comes directly from the fact that they said that they wanted to have, we lead Nike's transformation through being a collaborative shared learning team. And someone raised the awareness that shared learning is currently missing. There was currently no process, no mechanism that allows for shared learning within the team. Now, the next step in the process is the facilitator will help that person who now is the proposer to attach their awareness to a need and a value. Now, if we look at our values here, you see here the number 2 value is connection. And that person said, the value is connection with teammates. And the need is to get better at our jobs and to win, which you see number 5 is winning. Now, the purpose in doing that is that once you have your culture statement and your core values, you can then begin, you now have a shared language, okay? A shared language from which to resolve conflicts and make decisions. This shared language allows you to have values-based conflict resolution and decision-making, which is much better than blame-based conflict resolution and decision-making, finger pointing, us versus them, any of those energies that tend to escalate conflict and cause conflict to become, negative. This values-based, communication, it streamlines getting from where you want to be to where you want to go. So, and also by making it explicit, it just enhances communication. It takes your communication to a next level by taking the time to make the awareness, by tying the awareness to that need or value, it makes it explicit so everyone is on the same page and everyone understands. Once that's done, the next thing that the facilitator will do is ask the proposer to, before asking the proposer to propose a solution, the facilitator will give the other participants an opportunity to ask questions for clarity, bring up any concerns, or add anything to the awareness, or bring any insights based on their experience, etc. Again, this is an inclusive process. After that's done, then the facilitator will ask the proposer to propose a solution. And then if there's any need for any dialogue around the proposed solution, this is an opportunity for that. So, and that goes back to our, authentic dialogue training. An authentic dialogue, simply for those who weren't there, in a very brief way of explaining it, is a communication framework that leverages conflict to strengthen relationships. And it does that by creating the language and the container for empathetic listening, empathetic questioning, and tolerance. And there's a framework and a process for doing that. And it's also a facilitated process initially, because unfortunately, we live in a world where debate is modeled as the default communication framework that we use. So transitioning our minds to an authentic dialogue paradigm, it takes time. So that's why facilitation is needed when a group or a team are initially taking that on as a tool for resolving conflicts and making decisions collaboratively. So with that said, after that process happens, the proposer proposes a solution, And the entire team has a chance to, ask questions, gain clarity, et cetera, until there's a solution that everyone feels like is good enough for now and safe enough to try. Why is that language important? Because again, we are being authentic and honoring the fact that change is inevitable. We can make a decision today, but the winds of change are going to happen. And then we may have to tweak it down the road. So we're acknowledging that up front. It also relieves us of the stress of feeling like it has to be the exact right decision in the moment. Okay, we know that we're going to try this out and that we'll have an opportunity to tweak it later. Okay, so in this example, Malik, Sarah, and Skylar will organize a shared learning masterclass. That was the solution that was proposed, and everyone agreed to it. So then it goes into the trying it out, column here on our board. Now, this is a Kanban board using Trello. There's so many technologies out there that have a Kanban board that you can use. Some organizations also just have it up in their office on a whiteboard, and they just draw lines and they have sticky notes and they move these cards or sticky notes along the process that way. Now, so let's say the meeting is over, and there'll probably be more awarenesses, but for this example, we're only talking about one. And let's just say that meeting ends, and then the next meeting, change-up meeting, or culture check-in is a month out. We recommend doing it at least monthly. Some organizations are more fast-paced and they have more going on and they try to do it more frequently, but at the very least, it's recommended that you do this monthly. So you come back the next month and you check in. How is this working? How is this shared masterclass working? What's working, what's not working, what tweaks need to be made? That dialogue is had, those changes are made as needed, and then the card gets moved along to practicing. A month later, you come back, you have the same open dialogue, and the card gets moved along to getting good at it, if you feel like you're getting good at it. If you're not getting good at it, and there's some more tweaks that need to be made to address the initial awareness, those tweaks are made, and it goes into practicing. The team may figure out that the whole shared learning masterclass isn't the thing. So you kind of rework it and come up with something else that addresses the awareness, the initial awareness and the initial needs and values. And you continue to have that in practice until you feel like you have something that you're getting good at. And then when you come back to discuss it, you move it to getting good at it. Ultimately, you move it to integrate it, at some point in the process. So you're looking at, 1, 2, 3, potentially 3 or more months of trying something out, filling it out, making sure it feels good, having an open dialogue about it and communicating about it together until everyone feels good about it. And then once it goes into integrated, you have a new practice within your team culture that is addressing an awareness that is aligned to your culture and values. The beauty of this process, again, is that when you come together as a team and you consistently go through this process together, you are proactively resolving conflicts. You are proactively making decisions in a way that's collaborative, that's equitable, that's inclusive. And the process in itself, when people come together and think together in this way, it breeds belonging. I can't stress to you how powerful this is. And I'm glad that we've had an opportunity to share it with you all. So Mariella, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sunjata, for walking us through that. I see that we've already got some questions coming up in the chat. And excuse me, so Sonal, I'll respond here. I believe Sunjata was referring to a project management platform or tool that functions as a board or helps you to keep tabs on progress. I think you said Kanban, Sunjata, at some point, and you're using Trello. Can you give maybe some other examples or ways people can monitor their progress if they are able to do this kind of work with their team?
Sure, I just put it into the chat. It's called a Kanban board.
Great, thank you. Perfect. All right,
and
someone,
I'm sorry, if someone Googles that, you'll see plenty of examples. Not of the change-up process, but of boards to organize in this way. You'll find plenty of them.
Awesome. So I just want to hold for a slight pause to see if someone has any questions or reflections that came up as Sunjata was sharing the board with us and going through the process. Anyone want to dig deeper into that. Otherwise, we'll go straight to the questions that folks have previously submitted. So I'll give a light pause to see if someone needs time to type in the chat or ask to hop off mute. All right. Otherwise, okay, let's move on then to some other questions that came up that were pre-submitted. So if you sent this question in and you're here with us today, just let us know you're here. We want to make sure we get your question covered. And if any questions come to mind or reflections come to mind for those of you who are live, just go ahead and drop those in the chat. So Sunjata, leaning into the authentic dialogue portion of this process, I know that we did part 1 here, and I dropped in the chat for folks to rewatch that. But we had some more specific questions come in regarding, conflict resolution using, these tools that you've mentioned before. So I'd love for you to tackle this a little deeper here. This first question reads, how can we handle conflict when there is an underlying mistrust because of racial and cultural issues?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And when you have mistrust, in an organization, it's hard to resolve conflict. So the trust factor has to be addressed. And what I would ask is really, what are the current mechanisms in place for addressing mistrust and addressing these things? Is there psychological safety, available within that organization, whether it be an HR conversation or, a conversation with a manager? Do they care, enough to address it? Those are some of the things that come to mind initially. And then beyond that, I know that this is one of many perfect, issues that having authentic dialogues can address. And where you have, people who just basically just creating a space and time for, creating the conditions for psychological safety to be present, which when we facilitate authentic dialogues, we do that. And then once those conditions are present and everyone agrees and everyone feels safe to communicate, then, people can communicate in a way where some folks may have an opportunity to, speak about the ways that they've been hurt and what has developed the mistrust. And then others, have an opportunity to maybe clarify and their position or the reasons they've said or done certain things in a way that where empathy can just be established across the board. And then from there, next steps, what do we need to rebuild trust once everyone understands everyone's, perspective and everyone's understanding of a given issue? Because a lot of times, a lot of conflicts are rooted in assumptions. And without the proper mechanisms to address and tease out those assumptions, then they linger and they become worse. And we create stories in our minds around what things mean, when in reality, and there's not a time that I haven't had an opportunity to do conflict resolution using authentic dialogue, no matter how polarizing the issue, that people weren't able to come together and find some common ground and some common understanding and move forward in a way that they all felt good about. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that response. I'm going to just give voice to Sonal's question here that they dropped in the chat. Can this process be used for all sizes of team in an organization? And I wrote in the chat here, but I would love to hear you reflect for those who are rewatching this. I mentioned to Sonal and everyone live that we've worked with as small as, partners, so 2 folks to up to 25 people, and we don't recommend more than 25 so that it stays intimate. And can you maybe speak to, why we don't go in and, work with hundreds of people at the same time? I love hearing you speak about how this is more about behavioral change instead of, checking a box or having people put a sign on a door. So can you speak to, which sizes of teams are more appropriate for this kind of process?
Sure. Yeah. So again, we have a limit of 25 people in a given workshop training, as well as in a given facilitation of an authentic dialogue or change up. And for obvious reasons, the smaller the group, the more intimate, the more voices have a chance to get heard and a shorter amount of time, but if we're going to do, like, if we have 25 people, we're going to need like a 2-hour window of having authentic dialogue. But if we had 10 to 15, we'll probably only need a 1-hour window or 90-minute window, just depending on what the given issue is, et cetera. But that can be within the context of larger teams. These are just smaller teams and within larger teams. And, there's a process for small teams meeting and then representatives from a team meeting together to kind of carry out whatever decisions are being made from the smaller groups so that there's cohesion. There's a way to manage that. So within a particular session, though, those are the numbers for the smaller groups. And then again, depending on the needs and the interconnectedness of a given organization and how large that team is, and that they need, to have that communication and those decisions to carry over into the greater, larger organization, we have a process for doing all of that. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And also, just to reiterate what you were saying, working with Nike, we weren't working with the whole global corporation of Nike. We were working with a select group, right? So just to have that connect the dots for some folks who are probably curious about that same question there. All right, so let's move on to this next one here that I find very interesting. How to measure the importance of each conflict. Which conflicts should we acknowledge and which should we let stay still? So I love this question, whoever submitted that. Sunjata, what do you have to say about this one?
Yeah, my answer to that is all conflicts should be acknowledged, because otherwise it will breed resentment. Let's say someone has a conflict or an issue that isn't being acknowledged. Well, that totally goes against the idea of creating a culture of belonging and inclusion, because that sends a message that that particular individual's issue or concern isn't valid and isn't valuable. So a lot of times I understand that organizations have competing priorities. However, there is an opportunity cost for not addressing the people issues, and only focusing on, customer facing issues and not addressing the organizational culture issues. And I think I've seen it happen over and over where companies just get so locked in on producing and production, and it deteriorates the morale of the staff and the employees because they put that on the back burner, addressing those issues on the back burner because they don't see those as like, money making, time being spent making money. But in reality, it is, because if your people feel good, they're more productive and they'll get more done in the same hour if they feel good about their work and they feel good about their culture than if they're doing so feeling resentful and feeling like they don't belong and feeling, like they can't trust and all those things. So there's an opportunity cost to not prioritizing your people in this way.
Yes, and I have been doing a lot of research on my own, and I'm finding that a lot of the data, like the numbers behind what you just said, they're very striking. So, someone might not think that they're losing money because they're, as far as leaders thinking about the bottom line, it's like, okay, bringing money into the company, being able to sell a product, being able to be different and innovative. So if you're not making space for this kind of conflict resolution to happen in the workplace, it seems like you're not losing money, but the statistics show that, over time, for sure, up to billions of dollars are lost. I think in the US was the number. I need to find that as you're speaking on the next one, I'll drop that link in the chat, because I think that, once people kind of see how these numbers correlate with not putting their people first, and putting, just thinking about the bottom line being a data point or a number or a dollar, and not letting folks share their authentic perspective in order to resolve conflict. I think it would be interesting. Someone dropped earlier in the chat, or they pre-submitted this question about like, how do you measure a thriving work culture? And I would love if we could start to, I think it's a collective change we have to do. Like this has to be on our list of, redefining productivity, let's say. So like what helps a team or a company be productive is not about the bottom dollar or the data point. It's about, how effectively are people able to resolve conflict where everyone is being heard, where everyone feels safe and has a place to belong and express themselves. And I know a lot of people might even disagree that the workplace is not a place to do that. But again, just to loop back to what we were saying, if you end up losing lots of money at the end of the year because you're not focusing on this, then, what's the worst that can happen? People get along, more easily, and you're able to be even more innovative based on the creative power that comes from that. I'm rambling there, but do you want to chime in, Sunjata?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great point because, it's when you have attrition, ultimately, one of the ways that this shows up is with attrition in terms of the loss. And when you have attrition, you're losing skilled and experienced people at your company, and you're having to rehire. There's a cost to that. There's a cost to rehire and bringing on and onboarding a new hire, but also that skill loss. There's a cost to that, because now you have to bring someone. It takes time for someone to let's say to recoup that skill loss, for someone new to gain the experience of your company culture and the processes and procedures and et cetera. And so what companies unfortunately will do is they'll only look at their revenue, that you said, that bottom line, and you'll see how much was earned, but it doesn't show how much the expenses were in terms of what they had to spend on those new hires. And there's no way to see ultimately how much is lost because of the knowledge gap and the skills gap due to having to consistently bring new people on, if you're losing people due to them not feeling like, the culture is a healthy and safe and thriving culture to be a part of.
Thank you for that, Sunjata. And I want to see if our audience is still with us. I want to see if you all can drop a 1 in the chat if you feel like your specific company has a strong company culture. Drop a 1 in the chat, and strong, you can interpret that as any kind of strong way that you want, that is able to be cohesive, that you feel heard, that really works as a machine or really works on an emotional intelligence level. So drop a 1 in the chat if you feel like your company has a strong culture. Drop a 0 in the chat if you feel like your company has 0 culture. Even if there is a written culture somewhere, write a 0 if you think that your company has 0 culture or needs a lot of help here. All right, lots of 1s, great. And someone wrote, but self-employed, and that's, I think it's even more important maybe in that case to make sure that you have a company culture if you're looking to grow. So thank you for dropping that in the chat. So lots of 1s, awesome. So this is another interesting question that was submitted. Again, let us know if you're here, if you submitted this. So what are some steps we should take to better design intentional conversations when conflict is a part of the role?
When conflict is a part. So, when I look at that question, when conflict is a part of the role, I'm gonna assume they don't mean it's like the role is like the job description is there's conflict, but it just kind of comes up within their role and how they engage with their coworkers. So, with that being said, I think that a way to do that is to learn some new skills. And one of the skills, again, that we teach is authentic dialogue. And we teach it in several different ways. And one of the ways that we teach it is how to have an authentic dialogue with someone, even if they haven't been trained on it. Because obviously, when we go into companies and we train it to the whole team, there's an understanding for everyone and they kind of can shift together. But when you're having to consistently be confronted with confrontation, with others who may not have sat in on a session or been trained on how to resolve conflict in a peaceful and healthy way, then there's some steps that you can take to model how to do it. And again, that was chat number 1 that I know has been dropped into the chat, where I talk about it from that perspective. We also have a training on it at our website, growdialogue.com, where it's how to resolve workplace conflict using authentic dialogue. And you can get some SHRM credits for taking that course through our website as well. And I just outlined for you how to, when someone is approaching you and the tension is rising, how you can respond and show up in a way where you're modeling the skills for authentic dialogue in a way where it shifts their energy and shifts their, energy and responses in a way where, it can de-escalate tension and you all can get to having a productive conversation. And it starts with you. So that's why I started out with saying, learning some new skills. So, I can't go through the whole training right now in terms of what the steps are. But I did, share some resources and some places for you to go to kind of get there. But it is possible. I want to say that.
Yes, it is possible. And I will find that link in just one moment and drop that in the chat in case anyone would find that helpful. And we've seen it used in the case where, let's say you aren't a part of the decision-making team to decide that, on an organizational level, you all need this kind of training. You haven't had the buy-in yet, but you know that you need to learn how to have authentic dialogue, even if, your team isn't all in yet, or they don't have the time or the resources or whatever. You can step up and, as Sunjata said, learn this new skill. And of course, what we talked about in the first chat, and with this process of having authentic dialogue, it works, it really works when everyone involved knows how to have authentic dialogue. But of course, the world is really big, so maybe everyone won't know how to have authentic dialogue, but this kind of on-demand training will help you come from a place where you know how to navigate those people who are, maybe looking to have debate all the time, or looking to do this power over and control dynamic. So I'll find that link and I'll drop it in the chat in just a moment here. So let's move on to the next portion of our questions here. All right, so let's talk about building culture. So this question leans into that a little more. How do you build a culture of conflict resolution when there isn't a trust culture established?
Yeah, great question. So again, I would imagine this is someone who, if they're not here, they probably would have put a 0, in the chat when you asked that question around culture, Mariella, and if a company has a culture, that you said, like a healthy culture, or something like that. And I'm trying to think of a way to say it where it's not just talking about our process, because that's really the process that I know. But I'll say, okay, you can start by coming up with a group of people who notice the problem as well, or going into like a survey process, where you're raising some questions around the things that you've noticed, and then you're figuring out who are the other people within the organization who may have noticed the same things. And once you've been able to, get a level of buy-in, and you've been able to like test your assumption, or not, it's not even an assumption in terms of what you're feeling, but test your assumption in terms of maybe wanting to know if other people are feeling the same thing. And, once you gain that level of buy-in, and you notice that a good number of your colleagues are feeling the same thing, then you can approach, management, your boss, whoever, about, some development training in this area. And you have data now about the need, and that I would think that would be a good place to start.
I love that. So you're encouraging people to be their own investigator, so that they can then, at least build a case for why this kind of work is needed. So again, I know a lot of folks don't feel supported in, maybe in the case that they, maybe they're not being heard. They're feeling, certain level of burnout, let's say, because no one is listening to the other person, or it's just really, mentally, it's not stimulating, so a lot of people feel like they're ready to move on, or ready to move up, or ready to move over, but they can't even start that conversation because they feel like they're not being heard. So yeah. I love the taking action by, seeing who else is seeing these things, and leaving some little breadcrumb trails for, at least for the next person, if you do decide to leave for whatever reason, they can already see, oh yeah, such and such was here and they noticed these problems too. And, we'll try to make some time in the future so that we don't lose another person,
Yeah. And just to be candid, with looking at that question again, the answer is you can't. How do you build a culture of conflict resolution when there isn't a trust culture established? You can't. So then it's like, what do we need to do to establish trust in our workplace? That's the first step.
Yes, that's the big one. It's hard. I feel like that's just an ongoing theme over these past several years. And, but that really makes an interesting environment for people to do something different. Yes. A good friend of ours, Matthew Reynolds, speaks about this a lot, where we do these chats as well about equity and emotional intelligence. It's like, start something new. Don't try to add to the design of something that is already designed to keep you out or not hear you. Just step over and start something new, and you're going to have people probably vibe with that and figure out how are you able to have these kinds of dialogues or conversations, or make these sorts of manifest these sorts of goals and make certain amount of money. It can get as superficial as that, or as deep as wow, you really look confident every time you show up, and it feels like you're being your authentic self. I don't see anyone doing that. And actually, this is a good segue into this next question here. So working remotely or working online, for a lot of teams who are seeing that these days, this question leans into that a little more. So how can organizations promote a healthy work culture in an entirely remote work environment?
Yeah, it's much of the same, much of the same things that we've been talking about, whether they are valuable and they work virtually just as much as they do, in person in the office. So I think it's still important to have a culture statement and core values, something to anchor you, something, creating an intentional culture is important, whether it be remotely or in the office, because, every organization has a culture. Whether it's intentional or not is one thing, but there's a culture. So even if you have a remote, working environment, I would work on those things. And something to ground you, something to anchor you. I think it's really important.
Love that. All right, moving on to this next question that I know we've seen a lot, working behind the scenes at the root level with different teams at different companies. We see that this is coming up as a big pain point, as far as, high growth in a short amount of time. And how do you create culture? How do you make sure everyone's heard? How do you, respect everyone's voice and still be innovative and create something new? So this question leans into that. Any tips for maintaining a thriving work culture while being in a company phase of rapid growth?
Yes. And the key is, the beautiful thing about the system that we have and that we implement, is that it works no matter where you are in your company's development. And I would say, even if you're in fast growth, it's important to slow down sometimes to go fast. And what I mean by that is, it goes back to the conversation around competing priorities. In addition to our trainings and workshops where we implement the skills for, co-creating your team culture and your core values, and then training on authentic dialogue, and then training on the change-up process. After that is implementation. So every month, having an authentic dialogue meeting, every month having a change-up meeting. Those things are so important for you to slow down and get out of productivity mode and come together as human beings and communicate together and be consistently in the practice of communicating together, so that as you're growing rapidly, you're building a solid foundation so that you're not growing on a house of cards, as they say, something that the taller it gets, the bigger it gets, it's just going to topple over and it won't sustain. We want to help you build a sustainable culture. I'm not impressed by companies growing fast, because we all know that companies come and go, and companies come and go all the time. I'm impressed when a company says, we want to grow sustainably, right? And the way you do that is by setting aside the time consistently, month in and month out, to make sure that you're remaining aligned and accountable to who you say you want to be for one another, so that you can be who you say that you want to be for your clients and your customers.
Absolutely. I love that. All right. So I'm just dropping in the chat some more links for folks. That Authentic Dialogue on-demand training link is there. And for those of you who are rewatching and don't have access to the chat, you can just go to growdialogue.com, and you can navigate over to business and teams, and you'll see the on-demand training there. All right. So folks are showing you some love there in the chat. Sunjata brilliantly said, yes, agreed. Let's move on to this next question here. We've got about 10 minutes left. So if anyone has any last minute questions or reflections, or extra resources, please drop those in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. All right. So this next question reads, how do we create an authentic work culture when business culture is oppressive?
Ooh, I'm gonna start out by saying again, you can't. You can't create an authentic work culture when the business culture is oppressive. However, what you can do is try to get to the root cause for why the business culture is oppressive if you're in an environment that is open to it. Because a lot of times a business culture can be oppressive and let's say the leaders of that company may not even know it, okay? A lot of people unintentionally oppress others just because our systems are oppressive. And just by following the rules of old, the norms and processes of old, which unfortunately are rooted in a lot of oppressive beliefs and ideals and behaviors, you can be in a oppressive business culture. So the first step is to address that. And, again, you can do that by surveying, to getting support. So you're not the only person going to the higher ups, and addressing this issue. So you want to make sure that you have support and that you test your assumptions around if other people are feeling these same pain points. So you would just write out some surveys and with specific questions about the pain points that you're feeling and see if others are feeling it. And then you make your case and go to management and leadership with those, with the data, and then talk about how you have a solution. I hear leaders say all the time, don't come to me with a problem if you're not coming to me with a solution. So then you can go to them with a solution and say, I know of a company named Grow Dialogue that can help us with this, or another company out there, because obviously we're not the only company that does this work. But there's plenty of companies out there that can help you, with improving your culture.
I love that. And the beautiful part about this work, at least one of the reasons I love doing this work, is because you don't want to compete. I mean, it's like, this is something that's deeply rooted in our system. And competition isn't even necessary because we all need to relearn how to get along with our neighbors and have different kinds of conversations. So I just, the work is out there, and there are lots of, even though I, facilitate this work, I see so much that I have to unlearn just from the way that I grew up, the neighborhoods that I grew up, the culture that I grew up in. So it's an ongoing process, which I'm just highlighting that, we aren't the only company, but we are here and we would love to, learn about you some more. So this is also a good time to shout out and get SHRM credits for this chat. So thank you, Paloma, for dropping that in the chat. If any of you are interested in collecting your SHRM credits. All right, so let's move on to this next question here. We've got just a couple more minutes before we wrap up, but would love to see if you have anything else to share here. So could you share some advice on how to manage power dynamics between managers and employees?
I always like to start the answer with a lot of these questions with authentically. And what I mean by that is, what are you feeling? Power dynamics. Okay, what does that mean? What's underlying that? What feelings are coming up for you due to the power dynamics? And then you could either address it if it's dealing with one manager that you have to work with, taking your feelings to that person and seeing if they would be receptive, or if it's like organizational with lots of leaders and maybe you've had conversations with other employees doing what I previously mentioned about, surveying and then taking the data to management, and then, observing how they respond to it. And then getting in touch with reality in the sense of, are they willing to do anything about it, or are they okay with the way that things are? And if they aren't willing to do anything about it, then unfortunately, and I don't like giving people saying this, but one thing that you could do is just, take what you've learned and use that in the process of trying to find a new place, a safer place to be, by, interviewing the people that interview you as you're looking around, interviewing people that work at other companies that you're thinking about moving to, finding folks on LinkedIn that work there and maybe asking if they're willing to answer a few questions, just to get an idea of the company culture. Because, for me, it's intolerant for me to stay in a place that feels oppressive, where people are leveraging their power to demean me or, not honor me or just make me feel bad on a day in and day out basis. And if I address it with them and I notice a pattern of them being unwilling to change their behavior, then it's up to me to take care of myself at that point. And that's what I would encourage you to do as well.
Yes. It's so simple, but also so complex, right? Of course, you got to take care of yourself first, but with all of the movement and expectations that we put on ourselves and, how we are defining even, what success means. This is one of the things I love bringing up in any kind of facilitation work I do. How would you define success and why do we define it like that? And then we start to unravel all of the cultural norms that have just been embedded in us and we start to create something new. We think differently. So this is why I love the work that we do together, Sunjata. Any final words? I won't read any more questions, but I do want to close us out with, what people can do next to continue the conversation, but just would like to hold space for you to reflect on all of the things you've mentioned so far.
Sure. Yeah, I would just again, just like to thank everyone for taking the time to be here, to listen and to get to know us a little bit better and the work that we do and how we offer solutions. And I just want to also just encourage all of you to continue to be the change that you're hoping to see in the workplace and in your relationships. And I'm, wishing all of you continued success and hoping that if you are in a place where the culture is thriving, that maybe you took something away that can help elevate and help you all thrive even more so and even more so sustainably. And for those of you who have noticed some gaps in ways that your organization can improve, same thing. Hopefully you've learned some things and you've gotten some nuggets that you can either take yourself and create something and implement something for the team, or reach out to Grow Dialogue or some other organization to support you so that you can create the conditions for you and everyone else to thrive.
Absolutely. And with that said, just gonna put some helpful points here so folks can know how they can continue the conversation with us. So as I mentioned when I kicked us off here, this is the third part of this 3-part series that we've been partnering with Power to Fly to talk about conflict resolution in the workplace. So we plan on doing some bi-monthly chats with Power to Fly. So for those of you who have been keeping up with us each month, we're going to take a little pause next month and we'll be back on the scene, but be looking out for an email with those new dates. You'll probably get a rewatch email that will include that information. So be on the lookout for that. At the bottom of your screen here, you will see your SHRM credits that Power to Fly is offering for this conversation. So thank you all for participating. If you signed up for this chat, you'll also be getting an email from Grow Dialogue that will give you access to more SHRM credits. You'll be able to have access to the on-demand trainings that we're creating. The one that I've also been dropping in the chat box today, specifically about resolving workplace conflict using authentic dialogue. And you'll also be in touch with us through our newsletter that you're welcome to opt out at any time. And please be sure there's a link in there with the Google form. If anyone needs any conflict consult now, next week we'll be opening our calendars up for people to get that from us. If someone's going through something right now that's urgent or they need help to navigate this, we will be reaching out to you if you sign up with that Google form. Otherwise, if you're looking for a discovery call, if you're like, yeah, our team needs this, we're going to try to get our leaders to buy in, or if you are the leader and you want this to happen, again, fill out that Google form or just reach out to us directly on the various ways that you can, which is growdialogue.com. You can connect with us on LinkedIn as well. And without further ado, again, I hope that we can all just be more connected to each other in a way that involves our holistic dynamic selves, and it doesn't just ask us to check everything out of the door. That's the old way of doing work. We're all about creating something new. So Sunjata, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure as usual. Thank you, Power to Fly, for hosting this conversation. Thank you everyone for showing love in the chat. And we'll see you all on the next one. Take care, everyone. Peace.
Peace, y'all.